Hi, I'm really pleased to be joined by Khalil Sayegh. Khalil is a political analyst originally from Gaza and the head of the Agora Initiative, and someone that I've really learned a lot from over these last 15 months and beyond for his analysis of events in Israel and Palestine, and also just really admired his consistent ethical perspective. Khalil, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Peter, for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
So I always feel like in these conversations, I feel there's a tricky balance between focusing and not ignoring the things that Hamas does that are immoral and wrong, and not ignoring those, but also not talking about them to the exclusion, right, of the terrible oppression and destruction that Israel has committed in Gaza. So I want to just put on the table that we're going to be talking about both of those things.
Yeah.
But I thought I would first start just by asking you to talk a little bit about what you wrote in the wake of the way that Hamas handed over the Bibas family, the two children, and what people thought that was the mother and turned out not to be the mother. You were very critical. You also said that you were hearing from a lot of people in Gaza who were critical, and yet you felt that there were some kind of leftists in the West who wanted to justify or apologize for that. And I would love you just to talk a little bit about that experience of watching and then the discourse that you saw.
For sure, yeah. So this, obviously, as you laid it really well, I think we cannot take any incident out of the context of the occupation and what has been happening to the Palestinians, and really the genocide that has been committed in
Yes.
Gaza,
Yes.
that has been really affecting every aspect of life for everyone in Gaza. Then, when it comes to the hostage handling, whether it's the handover of hostages who are alive or dead, Hamas have really used that to send messages to Israel all the time, messages of power, messages of determination that we are the day after, and really actually messaging to the inside Palestinian political scene that we are here, we are the most powerful, we are the most dominant. And everything in this show is really manufactured and articulated in a way to send those messages. And we've seen this consistently with every hostages handover. And I've been really critical of all of those, but I didn't spoke as much about it because it was awful. But when you compare it in the light of the genocide, it's
Right.
nothing, right? And you
Right.
don't want to really distract people from the light of the genocide. But
Yes.
when it reached to the point where
Yes.
Hamas is literally staging the bodies of babies and the body of what we thought it was the mother of the babies,
Yes.
and it turns out she's a Palestinian woman actually, and berating them with songs and with victory slangs, etc. I feel that this is going too far. I felt that this is a clear violation of the dignity of dead bodies. To start with, it was already an unimaginable horror and a huge mistake for Hamas to kidnap the babies. This is a war crime that cannot be gone unanswered. But to even go farther, to berate them in this way in order to impose, your power and show that you are the most powerful and that you are the one who is in charge. I think it was a really awful thing. But I was surprised. I was really surprised by the left response here in America, or some of the left at least, that we're really either are willing to ignore it completely, in some cases, in some horrifying cases, even praise it to say like, oh, look, they're doing good to them. They're putting them in coffins. They should be grateful that they're in their coffins. Not to mention that they completely ignore the fact that they were kidnapped by Hamas, or they would bring the excuse that they were kidnapped by, Kataib al-Mujahideen, a smaller militia in Gaza that literally is oversized by Hamas. All the small militias in Gaza are oversized by the command center of Hamas, what's called the Ghurfa al-Mushtaraka. So I was really frustrated by that. But I even was more shocked when some people, what I call, start making almost what sounds like a Palestinian Hasbara, where literally you're trying to fool people by saying that what actually happened to these people was a funeral. It's not really a show or manufactured show or whatever. It's a funeral. When in reality, every single person in Gaza understood that that wasn't a funeral, that was a show. And on my Facebook page, when I go to my Facebook page, which is filled with my friends in Gaza, I've seen hundreds of people expressing their frustration over that. A, because they felt that kidnapping kids and then the kids dying in Gaza was shameful. And even if you did it, you should, at least when you release their body, do it in private because you should be ashamed. And the second thing, because they also felt that this will bring about an Israeli revenge that they cannot themselves handle the price of that. And to see that these voices are being completely ignored by the left, it was really heartbreaking for me. And that's why I felt the need to speak up about it.
Khalil, why do you think that Hamas or these smaller group Mujahideen, why do you think they did this in the first place? I mean, beyond being a war crime, right, and immoral to take children and this woman. It also seems to me strategically very, very stupid, right? I mean, and the civilians in general. I mean, if you had soldiers, it seems to me only take soldiers, you would be able to make a more coherent argument about what you were doing, and you would still, obviously, I'm not saying Israel would not have gone in and killed vast numbers of people, and I'm not saying America wouldn't have supported that, but you would have been in a better position in your message, in the way you spoke to the world. So why do you think this with the Bibas family and more generally with the civilians happened at all?
So just to be clear, this is not the only kid that was
Yes,
kidnapped
yes,
by
you're
Hamas.
right. Yes,
In November 23, there were other children that
yes,
were released, including Arab children, Bedouin Arab children, who
yes,
they did it privately. There are two times when Hamas released hostages privately without a show. One, which was last week, when they released Hisham al-Sayed, an Arab Palestinian was citizen of Israel from Negev, who was kidnapped 10 years ago, mentally ill, entered Gaza, released him privately. And the Bedouin girls, two kids who were also kidnapped, and their father died in Gaza, who was also kidnapped, and they were released in November 23 without a show. The reason why it was without a show, not to frustrate the Arab public and the Palestinian scene, to show they also kidnapped Palestinians. So no, that has been, to me, it seems like it was a consistent pattern. It wasn't like one mistake off here and there. So why did they do it? I really don't have an answer. I don't think it was an official policy of Hamas go and kidnap kids. I really don't. Despite that, I'm not a fan of Hamas, and you know that, Peter. I really don't think it's a policy. When you listen to Muhammad al-Dayf directions to them in October 7th, he warned them against two things: do not touch kids and do not touch elderly. That's what he said, right? Quoting all texts from Islam. Yet Hamas ended up kidnapping kids and kidnapping elderly, also like people plus 80 years old. So I really don't have an explanation for that, but I can give you the following. Most of the people who would justify it, and there are very few people who actually would justify it beyond that it was a mistake, that they were got there by mistake, etc. They would say, and these are very small fringe group within Palestinian society, the whole idea that everyone on our land is an occupier, and thus we have the right to do that. And this is more actually of left-wing ideology than actually even Islamist or a Middle Eastern idea. It comes more from, anti-colonial theorists who,
right.
or at least the reading of them, that
Yeah.
I start seeing more and more, even here in the West. So that's, I think, what's happening there. But people who say it's a mistake, or people who say Kataib al-Mujahideen kidnapped him, or whatever, my question to them simply, Hamas could have released him the day after without conditions.
Right.
So the whole argument is like, well, Hamas said, let's have 2 days ceasefire and we release them. And Israel refused. Thus, the entire blame is on Israel. Well, partially that is true. But if Hamas was completely serious about releasing them unconditionally, and unconditionally is important, they would have released them the day after. But they didn't want to release them unconditionally. They wanted to release them conditionally. And this, again, put us on the same place that Hamas did a war crime when they kidnapped them, and they did another, I think, a crime when they kept them in Gaza.
Yeah. So I not only agree, but deeply admire your moral consistency in your belief about human beings should be treated. But let me just play devil's advocate and try to get into the mindset of some people on the left, whether they're Palestinian or not, who might say something like, listen, the Palestinians are always dehumanized. They're always described in these racist ways as basically like animals. So when you start saying these things about Hamas, what you're actually doing is you're contributing to this discourse that then is used to justify what is now, I think, increasingly understood as a genocide by people who study international law. So how do you respond to that left-wing argument?
I think the unfortunate reality that we are already being demonized by the right, and we have been, genocide has been inflicted on us without anyone speaking, especially government officials and elites, etc. My response to them, it's very simple. My morality is not based on other people's usage of whatever statements I make. If someone did something wrong, I think this should be very specifically spoken about as this person did something wrong, or this group of people. Actually, I'm of the opinion that the other side is demonizing us too, as well. The left is demonizing us, Peter, from my point of view. I tell you how, I'll give you two examples. So the right in Israel and in America, the Zionist right as well. I've read this article on a Jewish magazine in America that really broke my heart, in Tablet magazine, that says all Gaza is Hamas.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
bottom line of the article is genocidal, Peter, because it caught the president of Israel were saying even civilians are complicit, all civilians, and thus the conclusion of it that we should call them out.
Yes.
They're all Hamas. No one is uninvolved. Kill
Yes.
them all, even
Yes.
the kids.
Yes.
The left the far left, at least, those who defended Hamas as kidnapper of the bypass, they respond, yes, they are all Hamas, but they're good. Like that's literally they say all the people in Gaza support Hamas, all the people in Gaza quote unquote support resistance, and that's okay from their point of view. So I am not here to say like I'm not making equation between both, but when you are saying that we are all Hamas, when you are saying that we are all supportive of this idea, and that's when you criticize Hamas, you criticize the entire Palestinian people. A, you are contributing to the right-wing tropes, from my point of view. B, you are stripping us from our agency as people who are citizens of Palestine. Peter, I'm only citizen of the Palestinian Authority. I don't have another passport. And when I speak, although I'm stuck here in America, I can't go back because of the occupation preventing me. But that's the only citizenship I have. And these people, whether I like it or not, they force themselves to be my government. That is Hamas. So it is my duty and it's my responsibility to criticize these people, especially when decisions they make is literally a life or death sentence for my family and for myself. So I think it's important that we put that in that context. So how do we then answer people who would use this to demonize us? I think my argument is that by criticizing such actions, we are even furthering distinguishing between a group of people doing something and the other way around. And the same can be said about Israel. It's the same argument being used, Peter. They're telling us that by criticizing the state of Israel, the apartheid regime that exists today, you're literally demonizing all Jews, and we reject that premise. They're telling us that by criticizing the occupation, you're really saying that every Israeli could die. They are telling us even if we support armed resistance against soldiers, it's the same as we supported against civilians. So unless you're capable of making these moral distinguish between all of these things, I think life becomes meaningless.
This has been a free preview. If you'd like to hear the rest and support my work, please consider subscribing at peterbeinart.substack.com.